day, another Bruins game in the books.
Right here on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
But the conversation continues. Welcome to Bruin Talk, your post-game chance to react to the Bruins.
This is a special program.
And now, your host for Bruin Talk.
Time to talk about it with Bryan Fenley.
'Cause everything I touch turns gold.
Your host, Bryan Fenley.
Was it ideal? Probably not. Could it have been worse? Definitely. UCLA losing at Penn State, the number 7 ranked team in the country, 27-11. And we are going to talk about this game in length on Postgame Bruin Talk. Yes, I am Bryan Fenley. You can follow me on X at Bryan Fenley. And we are a caller-friendly radio show. 866-987-2570. 866-987-2570. Even though we are in this rebuilding tenure, this is what this season feels like as UCLA drops to 1-4. Are we seeing progress from the Bruins in the throes of losing? Look, that's not ideal. We want wins, and it's not looking as if we're going to get a whole lot unless something changes, and that could happen because we are going to see some easiness pop up on the schedule. The gauntlet that UCLA played in those last 4 games, all of those 4 teams during their current 4-game losing streak, they're all ranked. They're all in the top 25. Now things get a little bit easier moving forward. With all of that said, I wish I could report to you that the Bruins got a token win on the road at Happy Valley, Beaver Stadium, and showed off and showed out, but I can't say that to you. But what I can tell you is that there were a bunch of firsts for the Bruins in quite some time that I think as UCLA football fans, you should take some solace in. A little bit of pride. Not that much, just a little bit, because, yeah, the ultimate goal is to win. But for the Bruins, their first offensive touchdown in 3 games. Offensively, this is where the team is at its lowest. If you're looking at one particular side of the football, it is the offense. They need the most work. And the other question was UCLA finally going to get an offensive touchdown? They did that after 9 quarters without one, going back to the second quarter of the game against LSU 3 games ago. And then when was UCLA going to finally get that pass rush going? When were they going to get that first sack? They haven't had a sack since the season opener against Hawaii, and they got one in this game. Femi Oladejo, one of the bright spots on this defense for UCLA. And with all that said, though, I look to something that I feel is the biggest talking point coming into UCLA's game today against Penn State. The Bruins threw in a new quarterback, Justin Martin, his first career start, the guy who's from Inglewood. He's been with the program for 3 years and played in spot duty in prior years. He got in a little bit last week and then played a bit the season ago and actually threw a pick. So you're not seeing a huge sample size. So you probably, as a Bruin fan, knowing that he's the quarterback, not holding a lot of expectations and putting a lot of thought or credence into, yeah, we probably have a chance in this game. I want to be the first in the classroom to raise my hand and say UCLA had a chance in this game. But I knew with the lack of experience from Justin Martin, that was going to be a tall task. But I will tell you, from the body of work that Justin Martin threw at us, he is better than you thought he was. And there's a physical, imposing nature to his play where he goes in there, and for a guy that has never started, he goes into an environment at Penn State where there's about 110,000 people, does not turn the ball over. His numbers in the game, 22 of 30 through the air, 167 yards, 73 was his completion percentage, and he started this game on target. 9 of his first 11 passes for 59 yards. That would be through the first 2 drives. His first 6 passes were completions. And yes, I can't say this enough. No turnovers. And I go to something that I know I'm not the only one thinking about when it comes to this. Did Justin Martin give you enough, with all due respect to Ethan Garbers, the injured quarterback for UCLA, who has been the starter to begin this season but did not play in this game, was knocked out of the game in the fourth quarter against Oregon. Now, going into this game, Ethan Garbers didn't really practice. He essentially was confined to the exercise bike, and so we don't know his status going into next week. Let's throw out this scenario. As a Bruin fan, and I want to get your take on this, 866-987-2570. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley, reacting to UCLA's loss on the road against Penn State 27-11. Did Justin Martin show you enough on the field to where you're more confident with him being the signal caller throughout the rest of the season, or are you more akin to saying we got to get, if he's healthy, Ethan Garbers back in there? Again, I love Ethan Garbers, but I am on the side of saying, wait a minute, Justin showed me something that I feel like could be something special. And I almost am going into the school of thought that he might be the answer for the rest of the season. More on that in a moment for a top-of-the-hour ID. Here on AM 570, LA Sports, Bryan Fenley with you, post-game Bruin Talk. So is it Martin? Is it Ethan Garbers? I know that has to be one of the prevailing questions. If you're driving in your car, you watch the game, you listen to the game on the radio here on the flagship of UCLA. Are you willing to go forward with Justin Martin as your quarterback? The very first drive to me was very telling, because if you go to the game and you watch it and you see, here he is, essentially nobody had any expectation for what he was going to do. Even Wednesday after practice, Penn State head coach James Franklin, he gave off the impression when he was asked about the quarterback situation with UCLA, he essentially said, our focus is on Ethan Garbers. He said that he felt that Garbers was going to play. I'm not so sure where he's getting that information. Thankfully, he doesn't have any inside intel because Garbers did not play in this game. And to the extent of not only Justin Martin playing, but Franklin said that he went back to high school to watch Martin in his playing days in high school. And that was where they were able to take game tape from him. Because as I said, and as you know, we haven't seen a lot of Justin Martin during his tenure at UCLA. And by the way that Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for UCLA, went about conducting business with Martin on the field, it just felt like he was protecting him a little bit. I would have loved to have seen more of the deep throws. Obviously, that comes with a greater risk. But I also felt, because of the way James Franklin talked about Justin Martin, he even said when referencing him, we're not going to be chasing ghosts. That's what he said on Wednesday after practice. And what he essentially, I feel like, meant by that is, why would we prepare for somebody as a quarterback that probably is not going to play? And with all of that said, I think the way that the Penn State Nittany Lions played, particularly in the first half, it looked like they were a defense that hadn't spent a lot of time scheming and knowing his tendencies. And I don't think that's been talked about with all of the attention going on Ethan Garbers. So the first drive, Justin Martin, he goes 11 plays and more than 40 yards, and they have a 4th and 1 inside the Nittany Lions territory. So it's 11 plays, 46 yards. Martin completes his first 6 passes, eats up about 6 minutes of the clock. And this is not the only, but this is one of the glaring issues I had as far as play calling on 4th and 1. I love the decision, by the way, no score, where we're in the first quarter and UCLA is driving their first drive with Justin Martin at the helm, and you go for it on 4th and 1, deep in Nittany Lion territory at the 25. But you throw out such a predictable play. You go right up the gut where you know the D-line is going to be crashing in, and TJ Harden, the running back, gets stuffed for a loss of 1. So the Bruins, they are able to move the football, but they don't pick up any sort of field goal or touchdown or whatnot, so they come out of that first drive scoreless. Which brings me to my other point. The final score of this game and some of the numbers of this game between Penn State winning 27-11 against UCLA are deceiving. I say that because not only did UCLA and Penn State go the first quarter without scoring, Penn State forced to punt their first two possessions. And for the first time in what is the fifth game of the season for UCLA, they finally don't allow their opposition on the very first drive, they get it, to score a touchdown. And not only that, but they forced the 3-and-out. Again, moral victories, not something that we're running to, but just to help us through the murky waters of this rebuilding year that we're seeing at UCLA. It does give me some semblance of comfort, just a little bit, not a whole lot, because I want to win just like everybody else, but to see the defense taking steps in the right direction. And even though at the half it was 14-3, and after UCLA had forced the Nittany Lions to punt the first two drives, the final two drives of the first half, the Nittany Lions, they score touchdowns. And I'm thinking to myself, I watched the first scoring drive for Penn State, and Drew Aller is there at quarterback. Drew Aller, can I say overrated? Is that okay to say? The guy is a game manager. He's not that great. And even so, that first scoring drive, UCLA, and this goes back to a lingering issue they've had, is getting off the field on third downs. Aller, during that first scoring drive, picked up third downs 4 times, which then led to the score. And let's go to one of those. Yeah, Drew Aller and what he did early on, because not only was he picking up first downs through the air, but he had 3 first downs he picked up with his feet in that first scoring drive.
Go for that same formation you mentioned. Push the pile, and as they untangle, touchdown is the call. It came very late from the head linesman on the near sideline.
UCLA Bruins Audio Network. So that was the third down that Aller picked up with his feet, and that got him into the end zone. And so Penn State goes up 7-0. This after UCLA, they could have kicked a field goal. They were at the 24-yard line. I love the decision, especially early on, to go for it on fourth down, but they turn it over on downs. So then you get a 7-0 score for Penn State. Again, second drive, Justin Martin leads the team down the field, and they get a field goal. And then the same thing happens. It's the inability to stop the Nittany Lions on third downs. They pick up another score at the end of the first half. Going into the half, Penn State 14-3. Why did the Bruins lose this game? I'm going to confine it to one thing. The shortcomings offensively in the third quarter. If that doesn't happen, UCLA is within a touchdown. Dare I say it? They might even win this game. And that's just not the inner homer UCLA Bruin fan in me talking. Believe me or not, I can be unbiased here on the Postgame Bruin show. Like, that's actually something that I can do. Yeah, I know you're rolling your eyes, but think about this. The third quarter offense for UCLA, and I thought this is where they lost the game. They go -9 yards in the third quarter, just standalone offensively for the Bruins. 3 of their 4 penalties were in the third quarter. They punted the football 3 times in that quarter. The 2 sacks they gave up came in the third quarter. And the offense continued to be the problem. And even though UCLA did not have a 3-and-out in the first half, the very first drive, they deferred, so they got the ball first coming out of the half. The very first drive in the second half, they have a 3-and-out. And you're thinking to yourself, here we go again. Despite that, where do I see encouraging things? Only 2 sacks allowed in the entirety of the game. That's an improvement for UCLA. and you're listening to Postgame Bruin Talk here. I'm Bryan Fenley. Sam Yoon made his first career start at center for UCLA, and then they moved what had been the center, Josh Carlin. He goes to that right guard spot. Much more comfortable Josh Carlin looked, Sam Yoon as well. So you're starting to see a little bit better chemistry with the offensive line, as the guys were talking about during the game. If you were listening to it live here on AM 570 LA Sports, when Carlin, and I've had a chance to meet the guy, love this guy, but when they put him at center earlier in the season, the guy was snapping the ball into the ground. And some of the snaps were so high, they almost flew over the head of Ethan Garbers. So I go back to a few things. The numbers of this game, the 27-11 final, deceiving, especially with the improvements offensively with Justin Martin, but defensively as well. You get your first sack. Femi Oladejo gets the first Bruin sack since the season opener. UCLA had 5 sacks in the season opener in that win against Hawaii. They had gone all the games since without one. And you know who's making a lot of plays? Carson Swessinger. 15 tackles for UCLA. We talk about Oladejo, and traditionally he's been at the linebacker spot for UCLA, and now they're working him off the edge, trying to generate a pass rush. Then you bring in the linebacker in Carson Swessinger, who had 15 tackles in this game. The man was all over the place, and he deserves some credit. Again, I'm looking for things to be happy about. I'm looking, yes, you could say I'm reaching. It's a stretch because UCLA lost. But I can't help. It's sort of like when you go on the golf course and you stink it up out there, which for me happens a lot, but when you hit that one good shot. You hit the one good shot, you sink a 15-foot putt, or you finally find the center cut with the fairway off the tee box with the drive, and that is what brings you back. And why I say that is because there were moments. You can play a decent first half. UCLA did that against LSU. They were tied with LSU at 17 at the half. But I thought, and this is up for debate, that the best, you could argue, half for UCLA in this season so far would be the first half against Penn State. Why do I say that? Because there was more continuity in the form of moving the football, moving the chains. And so while at one point UCLA goes down 27-3, it just never felt like the game was that out of hand, because mentally I'm thinking to myself, yeah, with all of this going on, UCLA is still moving the football. So they were doing that. When we come back, I want to welcome in the callers. Again, 866-987-2570. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. As a Bruin fan, I'm going to throw this out to the callers. Are you encouraged by what you are seeing? What did you think about the improvements? And what do you think about the quarterback situation for UCLA? Do they, if they can, go back to Ethan Garbers, who was injured in this game against Penn State? Or do they ride with the Inglewood native, the man Justin Martin, who had some bright plays? Stuff that you think to yourself, I don't want that to be the last game if Ethan Garbers comes back next week that we see Justin Martin. Where do you stand when it comes to the quarterback battle? Next year, Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Bryan Fenley. Postgame Bruin Talk, Bryan Fenley with you. You can follow me on X at Bryan Fenley. We are taking your phone calls, 866-987-2570, reacting to UCLA football's 4th straight loss. This one coming at the hands of number 7 Penn State. Moments ago, UCLA head football coach Deshaun Foster talking to the media in Pennsylvania before the team gets on the charter flight back to Los Angeles. And I brought up something last segment that Deshaun certainly seemed to answer for me. Did Justin Martin, who got his first career start as the quarterback for UCLA, did he show you enough in this game against Penn State where you feel confident to roll with him the rest of the year even if Ethan Garbers is healthy enough to come back next week. Deshaun saying, quote, "This is Ethan's team. He's our quarterback. I think everybody has rallied behind him. But the type of player that Justin is, I think he'll understand the situation, and he'll continue to get reps and just continue to get more growth throughout the season," close quote. Nothing parallels the growth of live reps in a game. Reading into that from Foster, it sounds as if, thanks, Justin Martin, for your services today, but as soon as Ethan Garbers is healthy, he's back in there. Want to throw that out to the callers. Do you believe in that decision? From what I'm reading between the lines with Foster, I know you've got a lot more than just that to weigh in on. As we kickstart the callers here on Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Bryan Fenley. Let's join Mitch, who is in New Jersey. Welcome, Mitch.
How you doing? Thanks for taking my call. I like Ethan Garbers. I think he got maybe a backup career like his brother. But I think you got to roll the dice see what you have with Martin. I know we recruited a quarterback for next year, I believe. His brother plays for Tennessee. But Martin showed pretty good. He's tall. You see above the lineman. I got one more question. I'm a little disappointed with T.J. Harden. Why not being so productive? He's got the good prototypical size for NFL. Why aren't we getting more from Harden too? And thanks for taking my call.
Well, first of all, Mitch, I appreciate you calling in. To your point about T.J. Harden, I would throw it also to say he's not the only guy. And you can't put the blame on just one coach here. But I do, coming out of this game against Penn State, there were a lot of player usage questions I had, from T.J. Harden to Keegan Jones. And am I missing something? But why isn't that guy getting more touches? Why isn't he touching the football every offensive drive for UCLA? I don't get that. And I know that my sentiments are being felt by many of you who are listening to this program right now, especially when you see the one flash play, the glamour that he showed with that 22-yard run that is going to get forgotten in your memory banks a week from now. But it's those type of plays, adding those together for an offense that needs all the help they can get, that I just don't get why Keegan Jones and T.J. Harden are getting the football more often. I thought in this particular game, because of the way that things were schemed for Justin Martin, the onus seemed to be on, let's get him a couple of completions off short passes early on. Let's get him comfortable there. And his first 6 throws were completions. The running game, it's not just T.J. Harden, but it's still an offensive line that is patchwork. You bring in Sam Yoon, he's the center. First time he has started for the Bruins, and they throw him in at center. You move Carlin over to right guard. And yeah, it looks a bit deceiving because you look at the sack yardage, but even with all that said, Harden and Jones and the Bruins had their best rushing game offensively of the year. Is it something that they're going to be happy about? I mean, they'll be happy with the improvement, but they're certainly not going to be satisfied. And so part of it is, I think, more of an onus just to dink and dunk and get Justin Martin settled in. And Martin was talking to the media afterwards and said, and I'm paraphrasing his quote in the postgame press conference, where Martin is talking about how Eric Bieniemy, known to overcomplicate things offensively, seemed to really simplify what Martin needed to do. The light bulb moment. Oh, yeah, making things easier on college kids. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. And it's not just him. I think in general, this idea of Bieniemy coming from the NFL, and has been a while for him since he has coached college, dumbing things down. That's too severe of a term. Let's just say simplifying things, I think, will be very advantageous towards the prospects of UCLA starting to try and get on a run here and win. So early indulgence in the pass game, offensive line still mixing and matching things a pretty stout defensive line from Penn State, all led to an improved, but still, if you talk to Deshaun Foster, a mediocre display when it comes to the rushing attack. Let's continue on with our callers here on Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley, reacting to the Bruins 27-11 loss on the road against number 7 Penn State. Mike is in Los Angeles, and I believe, Mike, you've got a few things to say about that Bruin offense.
Yeah, Eric Bieniemy is horrible as an offensive coordinator. Now we know why he's not a head coach in the NFL. I hear there's a new chancellor coming in that's inspired about football. He wants the program to do well. His first move is to fire the AD, Martin Jarman, for putting us in this position, for hiring a coach with no experience when you could have hired Jed Fish or Jonathan Smith. The second move is get rid of Bieniemy. He's horrible. When we go 3-9 this year, you can't bring the coaching staff back. They're pitiful. He doesn't even know how to use the players correctly. And Garber should be the starter. And Bieniemy is awful. And now we know why he's not a head coach.
Summing it up very succinctly, thank you, Mike. And I know your feelings on those different topics that you talked about are certainly being felt by a widespread number of Bruin fans. But I'm gonna push back a little bit on you when you say fire the current coaching staff, because you had to have tempered your expectations going into this year. You knew everything that UCLA lost when it came to defense. You knew a couple of the guys on defense even entered the transfer portal, and they followed D'Anton Lynn going over to USC, where he moved from UCLA's defensive coordinator to USC's defensive coordinator. But I think we're at a position here for the vitality or where it stands, that is, of UCLA football, that you can't ask for much more right now. And what we're really seeing, if you're going to go big picture, is there is a clear discrepancy in talent. There's a clear discrepancy in talent, and UCLA is on the wrong side of that. If you want to blame somebody, and I see why that would be something you'd want to do, you know who I'm looking at? I'm looking at Chip Kelly. And you probably are sick of me bringing him up because that's old news. But think about this. Why are we not competing or winning some of these close, or making some of these games closer, or at least competing and having a chance to win in this first year of the Big Ten? It's because this is the sad reality of the state of affairs for UCLA. The last 3 years that Chip Kelly was the head coach for UCLA football, he never really gave his rightful due attention to recruiting. We know there was laziness there. All he wanted to do is draw up plays in his quote-unquote lab and have no other responsibilities. It's like the kid who wants to play with all the toys in the playroom and doesn't want to pick them up. Like, that's not reality. That's not how things work. And I felt in his mind, the last 3 years that Chip Kelly was the head man at UCLA, Bruin fans, he played you. You got to wake up to that reality. He was, for the last 3 years, not only caring very little when it comes to recruiting, but in his own mind, the last 3 years, he was treating UCLA football as his side chick because he was always looking to level up, or in his mind, level up. I think that UCLA as a program is a humongous brand. For him, in this idea of him leveling up in pursuit of other jobs, teams, they kept swiping left on him. He finally, by way of a relationship with Ryan Day, it's almost like a sympathy hire. They bring him on as the OC at Ohio State. But I bring this up and go to the frustration that this fan base is feeling. And even though we live in a world now where program building isn't as common, where you can turn a program around within a year thanks to the transfer portal, UCLA was at odds in the transfer portal because of how late the hiring came for Deshaun Foster. So that put the team behind a little bit already. And then the players that he had, he's walking into a buzzsaw I have a strong, I would say, a relationship with Deshaun. We talk to him every week on the Bruin Insider Show, and I don't pity the man, but I feel sorry for him because what he's putting out there is not really a true representation of what he can do as a coach because of the body of work, the pieces around him that were left behind, because you have a former head coach that could care less and essentially was using UCLA. I'm fortunate, and you're listening to Postgame Bruin Talk here on AM 570. I'm Bryan Fenley. I'm fortunate that we have a new head coach, but I bring up something. It's easy to want to go right to the current head coach and say, yeah, he's the one to blame. I steer clear of that. Yeah, I'm sure he deserves a little bit of the blame, and he'll take some of that. But to call for his firing is nonsense. The thing you're going to get with the guys you have for UCLA is these players are more likely, when things aren't going well, to quit on a Chip Kelly than they are on a Deshaun Foster. Because Deshaun has cachet. He has trust. He's built himself up to be one of the great Bruin football players of all time. And the way that he communicates with his players, these guys, even though you look at it and we're 1-4, we've lost 4 games in a row, you have to just say, this was kind of what we thought. There would have been some hopeful optimism that UCLA might have won one of these games in this gauntlet. But we've seen in this 4-game losing streak, Indiana is a lot better than you thought. LSU is pretty good. Oregon as well. And, yeah, Penn State, that's a tough team as well. Although I think Penn State to be ranked number 7 in the country, that seems to be a little high for me. Callers continue here, and you can continue to call in, by the way. Bruin Talk, 866-987-2570. Gonzalo is in Covina. Gonzalo, welcome to the program. Do we have Gonzalo? I know he's been waiting. He might have just hung up, which is the perfect time to take that phone call. He said, I've had enough of this. I don't believe in what you're saying. I know somebody who is on the call, who is ready to come on and join. Harold is in North Hollywood. Harold is a regular, and he always brings spicy takes. Harold, what say you about this game?
Well, hi, Brian. It's good to talk to you. I like you, and I like Tim Cates also.
Thank you.
I'm a long-time Bruin, and it's frustrating, and I blame him mostly on, Kelly left us in the lurch, but Martin Jarman has to take some responsibility for not firing Kelly a year earlier when the guy was just not doing any recruiting.
Harold, I want to
on the transfer.
Harold, if I could jump in for just a second, and I'll let you finish.
Sure,
but
Brian.
You talk about Martin Jarman as if he had the power to fire, and okay, but here's the thing. And it's getting better because of the deal with the Big Ten. This has been well reported. Like, you've seen it all over publications and stuff. The athletic department for UCLA has been in a severe deficit. They are paying off all of these coaches. And so I don't know if they had the money to do that. So when you hear that, does that change your mind or something to that tune of saying, yeah, maybe it was time to move on from Chip Kelly, but I felt like for AD Martin Jarman, financially, the state of affairs at the time didn't lend itself to being something where you could make such a move like that.
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense. But, I mean, I can't imagine since Terry Donahue left, it's been just one frustration after another. And I just want to know when it's all going to end. I don't know if I'll still be alive when that happens, Brian, but I think Foster's doing a pretty good. I thought the Bruins played really hard today, and it's just I think they did a pretty good job putting that line of scrimmage together. I think they're a little bit better players. But do you think that the players at the moment that Foster has that we can really compete this year? I don't know if we'll even win another game. Hopefully we will. But I'm looking for the next couple of years for the recruiting to get better. And I don't know. You think Eric Bieniemy is doing enough on the offense to get us moving on that side of the ball?
I think the problem with Eric Bieniemy is, and thank you so much, Harold. Always love when you call on Postgame Bruin Talk, and we expect to hear from you next game afterwards as well. Eric, it's been a long time since he has coached college, and I just thought about this. When you're a pro, your life revolves around the game. Yeah, you might have a family, but your sole job is X's and O's. And when you've done that for as many years in a row as Eric Bieniemy, I can't help but think that he thinks that that's something that can translate at UCLA. The problem with that is that there's more to life as a student athlete than X's and O's. And so when he brings in, and I don't doubt 1 second, he's got these vast plans of these exotic offenses that he wants to work with, but at some point there needs to be let's move to the middle here. He has to, and I don't want to throw out ego because he's sort of, I don't want to say he's extremely stubborn and stuck in his ways and he wants the play calls to be a certain way, but I do feel like he could tinker a little bit more with what he's trying to do, listen more to the players, and play more into the talent and the bodies that they have currently. What he's trying to do, Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, would probably have been better suited if we had a quarterback, say, like Josh Rosen. And I just don't know. And I know that he's thinking about this as well. But with the type of talent we have, until we start getting the 4 stars and getting the 5 stars in recruits, it's not like we can't get those. Jim Mora got some 5 stars. So why can't we go into these rooms, these houses of these teenagers and convince 5 stars to come to UCLA? Now that UCLA is fully, or at least working towards it, getting on with the NIL situation. That's the other problem that we're forgetting to talk about, or we're understating. The state of the current affairs of UCLA football, in part, it is what it is now because Chip Kelly had more important things to do than not only recruit, which we talked about earlier in the hour here on Postgame Bruin Talk on AM 570 LA Sports. I'm Bryan Fenley, but also he had no interest in NIL. And this is the new normal in college football. If you're not getting involved with the NIL and fully embracing it, then you're falling behind. And so I feel like all of those things kind of come together and have put UCLA in a very extremely tough spot. Let's go to Mark. He is in Santa Clarita. Mark, what's going on?
Hey, that's a perfect segue what I was going to talk about. I think the NIL at UCLA is just a little disorganized. A lot of other major programs, whether it's Florida, I'm coming from Miami, which is where Julio Frank is coming from. It's organized at an athletic department level. So the basketball teams, the baseball, the football are all getting it. And UCLA's got such a large and successful alumni base. There doesn't seem to be a desire to kind of get that together. And before I get off, Julio Frank was almost being chased out of Miami for his lack of dedication to football. So I hope it's different here, but I wouldn't be too optimistic about that.
Thanks, Mark. I want to choose to be optimistic, whether that's rooted in reality or not, as far as the new chancellor coming in. But to your point about the NIL, here's something that I'm weighing. And it's sort of like the balance beam or juggling these two things. UCLA, we know that they are a dominant institution for academia. Number 1 public school in the nation, year after year after year. And I humbly believe that, and I'm not saying this is UCLA per se, but I think there are some institutions that are well endowed with books and academics and we are at the top of this and that I'm not throwing shade on UCLA, but they think that you can't be both. You can't be a great academic institution and also have the standards of being high up and really diving into the NIL. There is this like looking down on it. And I say to myself, why can't you have a program or a school like UCLA that is all in on books as they should be? They are at the top of their game in all of those respective categories when it comes to academics, and also be way up at the top when it comes to embracing NIL. There is this notion, I think, where education comes first, and education cannot be trumped by funneling into this, what's become the reality, whether you want it or not, that it is pay for play here at the stage that we are in college football. That's what I don't understand. Why high academic institutions, not exactly saying for UCLA, why you can't feel like it's not beneath you to go all in on your athletics and spend the cash, get the donors involved. I think UCLA is making tremendous strides in that. And look, I was on campus yesterday. I walked by McCronin, by the Luskin Conference Center. As you know, that's the hotel on campus, and he had a recruit with him. And I'm seeing him smile just walking out in public, unlike what I saw from him last year. Why is he smiling? Because the basketball team is getting with it when it comes to the NIL. And now he has something to work with. Now it's an even playing field. UCLA, I think, when it comes to their football program, not quite there NIL-wise with the basketball team, but I do see that the Bruins are under a guy who is able to accept this new reality in Deshaun Foster, that you have to do this if you want to compete. Because what does UCLA want to be? It's an identity that we're looking for. And I know Harold, one of our prior callers, was talking about years and years of, using his words, essentially paraphrasing, mediocrity with UCLA football. You go back to the Terry Donahue years, and can UCLA football ever get back there? It's going to have to come with a commitment from not just the athletic department, but from the chancellor. I did like what our prior caller said about the incoming chancellor, but that's going to go a long way in determining if UCLA wants to be, and I've heard people talk about this, do you want to be the Vanderbilt where athletics, and you have a couple of decent years football-wise, and then other than that, you're kind of at the bottom of the conference? Or do you want to embrace both? And is that something that could be socially acceptable in high academic circles within UCLA? That is something that I think we should stew on for sure. As we should, in rejoining with our buddy Gonzalo, who is in Covina, called us back. He's with us. Gonzalo, thanks so much for waiting. Gonzalo, are you there?
Hey, how's it going, Brian? Yes, how's it going, Brian?
Good, man. Thanks for calling in.
I was out here pumping gas in Costco here.
So what'd you think about the game?
You know what? Never happy with the loss, but very happy with our improvement on offense. You know, just to start off, you know, Martin, I see some things where we could build off of that. And I've called in before, and I've always said Garbers is not a game-changing quarterback, but I could see some good things with Martin. He had some nice passes today, and at the end of the game, he used his legs, and I think we could build off of that. But mainly, as I called in last week too, I think Keegan Jones is our answer to running back. You know, so
and they're not using him enough.
Exactly.
You know, and I called out Chip Kelly. Thank you so much, Gonzalo. I called out Chip Kelly, and I said it was a crime that he was mismanaging the speed of the talent of a running back like Keegan Jones. So much so that Keegan Jones was in the transfer portal. He was thinking, all right, I'm out of here because I want somebody who values me. I'm not saying that the current UCLA football team doesn't value him. They just got to find ways to get him more involved. I think that would take a lot, especially in the pass game, because where he can do his most damage is yards after catch. And if we're looking at, and Gonzalo pointed out some of the improvements or some progress that he noticed with UCLA offensively in this game. We're talking about UCLA in their contest today, falling on the road to number 7 Penn State, 27-11. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. So Logan Loya got the touchdown at the very end of the game, and it had been 9 quarters since UCLA had gotten their last offensive touchdown. To Gonzalo's point, I'm with him when he sort of characterizes Justin Martin. The way he was running and the alertness and the ability for him to pick up a first down, I felt like I was watching, just for a second, shades of Dorian Thompson-Robinson in that ability and that will to pick up the first down. Although, as I pointed out earlier, because, and this was admitted by Penn State head coach James Franklin on Wednesday, that he said we really didn't game plan, or we weren't expecting Justin Martin to be the quarterback, so they didn't spend a whole lot of time focusing on that in practice. It looked like the Nittany Lions, especially in the first half, didn't really know how to scheme against Justin Martin. And with that I noticed, that observation, I'm like, that would be the perfect time to take more risk. But I get the understanding that with Justin Martin making his first career start, you don't want to overwhelm him. You want to protect him. You want to keep him in a confident headspace and not make any drastic decisions that could weigh on his morale. But I can't help but thinking that even on third downs, throwing way short of the sticks, he was making completions, but why are we throwing it a yard in front on a 3rd and 8? I'm glad that we're making those receptions, but there has to be a further confidence, and I didn't see that. And I understand why, but they didn't allow Justin Martin in this game against Penn State to really air it out downfield and try to take the top off the defense. He's got a cannon. You could say what you want about his accuracy, and it might not be where Ethan Garber's accuracy is, but why not? What do you have to lose to take a deep shot or two with Justin Martin, particularly when the coach has just said Wednesday after practice coming into this game that he wasn't really spending any time planning for that quarterback. So you could have totally thrown off Penn State if you didn't play as conservative. Easy for me to say now, because with playing more aggressively offensively, you keep in mind this is his first career start. He's playing in front of 110,000 people screaming at him at Penn State. It's the first ever, as a member of the Big Ten, road conference game for UCLA. So he had all of these things going. So I get this notion that you want to sort of keep him in check and not make him be in a position where he's making mistakes. The one question I had was, and this probably had something to do with him being so new, they were getting out of the huddle early in this game way too late to where UCLA had to burn multiple timeouts. And I wasn't sure how well the communication was as far as what Justin Martin knew, what they were supposed to do, as far as the play that was being sent out there from the coaching staff, from Eric Bieniemy, and if that was translating. I felt like there was a little bit of disconnect, and there was a play that I felt, and the guys were talking about this on the radio when we were listening to the game live, where you had a third down, you had a fourth down in Penn State territory in the second half. And this was an opportunity and a drive for UCLA to cash in on some points. And you had an incomplete pass from Justin Martin looking to find Maliki Matavao. And it looked like Matavao was going one way and the throw was going another way. So these are things that, whether it's miscommunication, whether it's the environment and the ambiance of playing in front of throws and throws of people. There are some question marks about how well I thought, from my vantage point, the plays were being processed and being sent over to, again, he's an unproven player, but I'm going to say this. He played a lot better than all of you who are listening to me right now thought he would. You can shake your head at me and say to yourself, yeah, I thought he had this in him. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because what do we base him on? The little quality of work that he had. I can tell you this. When the quarterback situation was in a flux last year for UCLA and they went to Dante Moore and that was disastrous, I was on this show talking about how they should at least give Justin Martin a try. I know that late in the season, Ethan Garbers played very well, but why not? Especially in a game like where we got embarrassed at home against Arizona State, why not throw in Justin Martin? Because he's a better player than you think he is. And that's why, with all the confidence in the world that I have in Ethan Garbers, I still think, and I don't know if I'm in the majority, but I wouldn't be mad, I'll put it that way, if they decide, UCLA, that they move forward with Justin Martin. But if you were with us earlier in the program, after the game today against Penn State, it sounded as if when Deshaun Foster, the Bruin head coach, was talking, that he's leaning on just staying with Ethan Garbers. That as soon as he gets back healthy, and we don't know his status, obviously he was knocked out of the game against Oregon late in the fourth quarter. If he plays, if he is healthy enough, it sounds like the decision for Deshaun Foster right now is to go with Ethan Garbers and not continue on with Justin Martin. But what are we playing for? I get it that what's the coach speak? We got to go 1-0 every week, and we're only focusing on this week. But you can't help, okay, as a fan, to think about the vitality and the long-term picture of this UCLA football program. Where is this team right now? They've lost 4 in a row. They're 1-4. Are they going to make a bowl game? Mathematically, they could. Does it appear as if they are, given what they've showed us the first 5 games? I'm not so sure. So I'm not trying to throw shade on Ethan Garbers because I think he's a great quarterback, but I still feel like we should find more opportunities to get Justin Martin involved because he's only a redshirt sophomore. At some point, I think from a morale standpoint, with how much of trials and tribulations that the Bruins as a program have experienced this year, with the lack of consistency on offense and putting up points, why not look a little bit into the future? Why not say to yourself, all right, this is year 1. We didn't expect it for Deshaun Foster to be a world beater. We didn't expect to be at the top of the conference. Why don't we get more reps for a quarterback that could be the starter going into next year? Because this is the last year of eligibility for Ethan Garbers. Continuing on, we've got more callers, and you can continue to chat. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley, talking about Penn State, their win, the number 7 ranked team in the country. Don't ask me about that ranking and their quarterback because I think they're both overrated. But 27-11, UCLA falls. In Calabasas is where we find Stu. And Stu is with us on Postgame Bruin Talk, and he's got some pretty strong felt comments about this UCLA team. What's going on, Stu?
Okay, first of all, to think that UCLA is going to be in the discussion for anything in the Big Ten, if they win a game, one single game in the Big Ten, I'd be shocked. They're overmatched. They're not physical enough to compete with a good Big Ten team. Tell me who they're going to beat. You tell me who they're going to beat in that conference. They're lucky to beat Hawaii. Hawaii, they should have gotten beaten because they came back and they stole that game. Since then, they haven't even been competitive on the field. They've been leading 2 minutes in 4 games.
Yeah. The physicality, and I want to keep you on the line here, Stu. You're pointing out a lack of physicality from UCLA football. Who's at fault? Who are you throwing the blame game at when it comes to the lack of physicality that you're seeing from UCLA right now?
Recruiting. They're recruiting. I don't know where they're getting their players from, but they're not on the same level that the top 25 teams are in the country. Why? I don't know why. They get the homegrown California, LA product, and they can't come to UCLA. Where are they going? They're going out of state for some reason. UCLA does not have a football tradition or a reputation, and they've gone by the wayside in the last 10, 15 years. They're not even competitive.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you, Stu. And I know that how you feel, you're not the only one. Postgame Bruin Talk, Bryan Fenley with you. It is a 27-11 win for number 7 Penn State against UCLA. When we come back, I want to react to the comments that Stu made. They were strongly worded. He did not sugarcoat what I have to say about that. Plus, taking your phone calls. I see Harris in Los Angeles. We'll get to you on the other side. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. Shout out to our producer, Katie Newton, bringing the jams. This is one classic, I suppose. But anyway, we are talking Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. You can follow me on X at Bryan Fenley. Reacting to the Bruins' loss today at number 7 Penn State, 27-11. Let's go to Harris in Los Angeles. I'll follow up on my comments from our prior caller in the last segment momentarily. But Harris in Los Angeles, you've been waiting for quite some time, and I know you've got a few things to say. Thanks for stopping by here on Postgame Bruin Talk, Harris.
Yeah, good talking to you, Bryan. First-time caller with you, but I've talked to guys that were there before. But welcome to Bruin Talk. Anyway, I want to talk about this current situation with UCLA. You touched upon them, 2 items, and the one that the other caller made is aligned to that. First of all, you talked about Chip Kelly. I wasn't a Chip Kelly supporter to start in the first place.
Yeah,
he didn't. I wasn't. He didn't impress me. And what he did with UCLA after that, during his time, did less to impress me. I mean, when the basketball team hired Cronin, I mean, on the first year he took UCLA to the semifinals, if I'm not mistaken. And then you're talking about
his second year. Yeah, his second year he took them to the Final Four.
Or the second year. The hiring of Deshaun Foster. Well, UCLA has been caught behind the 8 ball. He doesn't have any experience. I'm not criticizing the hiring. He has had the sense of surrounding himself with people that know more about football from the NFL to give him a better support. So, and then they're talking about UCLA not being too physical. Well, they know that. They're not dumb. They're not naive. But at least give them a chance to work out. I wasn't expecting anything extraordinary with them. But as time goes on, they did something today against Penn State that we hadn't seen against Oregon. Oregon and Indiana. What's going to happen in the future? Only time will tell. But please give them a chance. You can't just hire this group and all of a sudden fire it. I mean, you just don't expect miracles overnight.
I get that.
But give them the chance, and let's see what happens as time goes on. Because they know that they're in a conference where a physical element has to be taken into account highly. And I'm sure they're going to be working towards that goal as time goes on. Thank you very much. I'll let you talk to the rest of the guys, and go Bruins.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harris. And you carry with you a lot more patience than most of the callers. I don't know how most of the callers are going to feel about the patience in just saying to yourself, let's let this play out. Let's see what Deshaun Foster can do. But I did want to get back to a call that was in the last segment where we were talking about the struggles in recruiting, because I asked the caller, I said, and he said that there was an issue with the physicality from UCLA, and they just weren't, and we know this, and I think the players would tell you this, they can't match with the Big Ten in the trenches right now. Not saying that's not going to happen. It's just having the bodies, and they just don't, because of the recruiting woes of the predecessor of a head coach, and Chip Kelly, who could care less about recruiting, and he essentially used all of us, and then he said, I'm out of here when it best suited for him. And I will say that when it comes to the recruiting, and that being connected to the lack thereof of the lack thereof of physicality, as the caller brought up, it revolves around the NIL situation. We know that is the case. We know that UCLA hasn't been where it needs to be. They seem to be progressing in the right direction with their NIL. And we've seen some other institutions, and UCLA is such a juggernaut. It is such a brand that you almost do a disservice when you compare that institution to another. But if I am to do that, there have been some schools that have been hesitant to get involved deeply in the NIL and have sort of, metaphorically speaking, dipped their toes in the water, and now they are all in, and they are seeing the fruits of what happens in that their recruiting is getting better. More on what I want to say in a moment, but let's pause a second for station ID. It's Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. We are going to be with you to the bottom of the hour. 866-987-2570, the number to call in as we continue to discuss the state of affairs for UCLA football following their loss today against number 7 Penn State, 27-11. But back to what I was saying about the NIL, especially how it pertains to UCLA. There are other schools that have noticed the rewards of having the NIL work, in the sense of, okay, now you bring in good players, your recruiting is better, now you're increasing the student enrollment, it's helping the school, it's providing more money for the school in the long run, where they can take the money made from athletics and then siphon it into other places. Here's where you can't compare that, because there's a lot of schools that will say, yeah, it does us a grand service to be good in sports, and that funds a lot of what we do academically. UCLA is already such a burgeoning academic institution that even if the football team is really good, you're still not noticing that, or if it's doing anything when it comes to, again, this is my perspective, and you can certainly call in if you feel like you're disagreeing with me, but UCLA is such a brand academically that part of me thinks there isn't really a benefit. They've got everything they need when it comes to money and finances and research and bringing in the best scholars and everything they need, to where those who are, and we talked about the new chancellor coming in, is the reason why UCLA is where it is when it comes to slowly getting involved in the NIL, is that because from the academic department and that side of things, they don't really feel like there would be any benefit to their end if the athletics is doing better. And I say that because of how strong and how dynamic and how world-renowned the academics at UCLA already are. So is that something where there's a conversation that needs to be had with those in academia? Hey, if we get all in on football, if we build up the athletic programs, there will be a benefit to you. I think some of the smaller schools, some of the schools that might not have the bar that is set academically, where they start to see the NIL paying off and the winning, then those that are professors there might say, oh, yeah, this is great. We're getting more students. We're getting all of these things happening to the institution. But UCLA is so big Like you could have at one time at UCLA 85,000 people on campus. I'm not talking just students. I'm talking about people who are visiting. I'm talking about workers and students and whoever is associated with UCLA. So there seems to be this idea, I feel like, is it going to move the needle? We're already this brand, this juggernaut. What's in it for us? And I feel like if both sides, academic and athletic for UCLA, can get on the same page, that it could be mutually beneficial. Bryan Fenley here, Postgame Bruin Talk. Calls keep coming, and you can keep them coming. 866-987-2570. We will be with you to the bottom of the hour. Mark joins us. Alhambra is where he is. Mark, thanks for coming on Postgame Bruin Talk. We got our guy Mark. Mark, are you there? Are you with us? Do we have Mark? Maybe we'll check in on Mark in a second. In the meanwhile, Julio is in Laverne. Let's get over to Julio, if we may. He's been on the line with us for quite some time. Oh, goodness, we have 5, 6 callers right now. Our producer, Katie Newton, is a rock star. She has only one person over there, but we need like a caller, a second helper here because of all the people that want to react and talk about this UCLA status of the program. They probably had something to say about what I just said because I don't know how often that's been talked about. But yeah, let's go, if we could, let's check in with Julio in Laverne. He's been hanging out with us for quite some time on the line. Julio, we want to bring you in here on Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley, and I know you've got a few things to say.
Hey, Brian,
yeah, are you there, Julio?
Yeah, Brian. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Are we good?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking the call. Just want to give everybody, just a quick, slow down. We know that losses aren't what we want. You're not going to win many games scoring 11 points, 13, 16. We understand that. But you got to take a look at the entire picture. We have seen incremental, small, but incremental improvements pushing the needle to the side that we want to see it, right? Rushing is improved slightly, but it's improved. I really like Justin Martin today. Did a great job, I think. First start in a big game, nationally televised. Great job for Justin Martin. I got to give that kid great props. But let's look at what did we expect? Did we expect to win 5, 6, 7 games this year? Be honest with ourselves. I want to make a point too about the physicality. There was a great observation I think made on the broadcast that we are physical, but we don't have the depth.
Correct.
Look at the first quarter. We hung in there. We were there. And yes, I think the defense got fatigued and slowly just wore down. But I like the fight, and I'll use the Coach Foster's language. I like the fight in the Bruins. We never gave up. We hung in there. So let's look at the big picture. I think we can beat Rutgers. I think we had a chance against Minnesota and Iowa. Don't think this all is not lost. Stay positive, Bruins. We're going to get better week to week. Have faith in Eric Bieniemy. I have a lot of faith in Coach Foster. Our defense is solid. We just need more players. We just need a couple more horses. That's all we need, guys. So, Brian, thank you for taking my call, and go Bruins.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Julio. Thanks so much for checking in with us. And that's one of the more positive callers that we have had on the program here. And I don't know how people are going to react to that, but you said it. It's not like we don't have dudes out there. We've got good talent. There's just not enough. Whose problem is that? Whose fault is that? Yeah, I said it. It's Chip Kelly's fault. It's not Deshaun Foster's fault. It's not Martin Jarman's fault. We could not, given the financial climate of where UCLA was as a football team, you might have been dissatisfied about the way Chip Kelly was handling things coming out of last year, and you wanted to get rid of him, and I understand that. But did UCLA athletically have the funds to make that happen? I don't think so. So I would pump the brakes a little bit and say, yeah, I get you're angry. We all want this team to get better. But these things take time, especially with a head coach who, as much as he loves UCLA, has never been a head coach before. But I got to go to something that we all know. you can be a great coach, but I love Deshaun Foster. But you put Nick Saban in as the head coach for UCLA, he's 1-4 as well right now. Nick Saban would be 1-4 with this UCLA football team if he was the head coach and Deshaun Foster wasn't. Because, to what our caller said, it's the depth. It's the dudes. We have been at a deficit in recruiting, and it's all starting to catch up with us. Transferring the portal, that can only do so much. UCLA has to get back to going into the homes. The recruits, they have to go. The coaches have to go into these recruits' homes. Teenagers, juniors, and seniors in high school, and sit in the living room of these coaches and these players and talk to their parents and say, you got to come to UCLA. You got to sell it, and you got to put the effort into it. We can get the big-time talent. How did Jim Mora get 5 stars? If he can do it, why can't Deshaun Foster do it? If you give him a full recruiting cycle, I don't see why that isn't a possibility. Tim is in Montebello. Let's go to Tim. Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. Welcome in, Tim.
Brian, I agree with you on the Chip Kelly point that, he left the cabinets bare. Let's not rush to fire Foster. We got a nice class coming in next year. And I just want to know why it took Foster and Eric Bieniemy 3 quarters to say, all right, Martin, start running. We know what the kid could do because we saw him at Inglewood High. We know he could run, and we know he could throw. They should have used his legs more in the first half than wait until the fourth quarter. That's all I have to say. Best of luck.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thanks so much, Tim. I think that we know that what Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator at UCLA, wants to do. We know his proven history. We know what he's done with the Chiefs. We know that he's been in the NFL for quite some time. He's a pass-first kind of guy, and that makes sense if you have a quarterback that fulfills what he's trying to do. Ideally, that would be great. I am not opposed, and I don't. I'm going to say this to you. Here on Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Bryan Fenley. I am not opposed to the play calling or what is schemed up from Eric Bieniemy, but what is not happening is he doesn't have the right guys to pull off those plays. That's the problem. Look, the guy has been in the NFL. You can say all he want. Yeah, everybody has stuff that they're working on, and you've heard reports about relatability with the players and complicated the offense is. Sure, everybody has something. But I would say it's not so much on him as far as what he's doing. Now, what you could argue is that he's not adapting to the talent that UCLA has enough. And I would say right there, that might be your issue. But if what he wants to do is what he wants to do, he doesn't have the right players in place to do that. If you had, callers are not going to come into Postgame Bruin Talk and they're not going to chastise a guy like him, Eric Bieniemy, if he's working with a Josh Rosen. If Josh Rosen is the quarterback, I think you're going to be calling in and you would see, oh, Eric Bieniemy, oh, what a great play caller he is. He's awesome. The problem isn't what he's doing or what he's trying to do. It's just that what he's trying to do, it doesn't compute because of the lack of depth, because of the players that UCLA doesn't have. And that's why we're seeing such a disconnect. That's why it's so important this year. This idea of, okay, if something isn't going well, let's just fire. When does that stop? At some point, UCLA as a football fan, you got to take accountability and say, okay, we've learned from our mistakes, but now we have a guy with Deshaun Foster. I'm going to say, even if, and I don't think this is going to happen, even if UCLA doesn't win another game this year and they finish the season 1-11, here's the one difference you're going to say, and I'm going to see, because I talk to the players every week. I'm at practice, and I get to see what they're like out there on the practice field. They're not going to quit. They might not win, but they're not mailing it in. And I can see that. I know that that's going to be the case. If you have a player or you have a coach who is as well respected as Deshaun Foster is, all you need is the guys. Give him a full cycle of recruiting. Tell him, and what he's probably telling himself is, look, how do you sell? Here's another question for you all. And this is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. And Mark, I see you. We're going to get to you in just a moment. We're going to the bottom of the hour reacting to the state of UCLA football. And now that they're 1-4, they lost earlier today to number 7 Penn State, a final score of 27-11. What is the selling point for UCLA football at this stage? It's easy if you win and you go into these recruits' homes and you say, hey, here's what you can do. You can build off what we have and you can sustain something. UCLA right now doesn't have that luxury. So there's going to have to be a leap of faith from the talent that they reel in when it comes to recruiting. That, yeah, UCLA might at this stage be unproven, but here's how you sell it. Who wouldn't want to, and as some of our callers have attested, and UCLA has been quote-unquote down for, look, we can argue about this. You can say all the way back since the 1990s. You could say 10 to 15 years. But to get UCLA to its glory days, what is that going to take? If you can sell somebody and a recruit and saying, look, yeah, we don't have a lot of depth, but you can come in right now and make a difference. And you can be that first recruiting class that starts to set in motion UCLA football returning to the glory days. I find, even outside of football, I find more fulfillment in not following somebody's lead necessarily and keeping a good thing going, but how much more fulfillment would you find in life with whatever it is into being the first to start something and then to have everybody follow suit. So the recruiting pitch that Deshaun Foster has, because at the end of the day, why is UCLA where it is right now? Why are they 1-4? They don't have the guys. It's not Deshaun Foster. It's not Martin Jarman's fault. They don't have the guys. If they had the guys, albeit every team deals with injuries, UCLA has a lot of injuries. If they had the guys, they wouldn't be quote-unquote out-talented. That is the biggest problem. Now you got to be creative on how you pitch. Hey, you want to be part of something that hasn't happened in UCLA in X amount of years? Do you want to be that recruiting class that generations and years upon Bruins will look back and say, that was the recruiting class that set the standard for what we want to get UCLA back to the glory days? Mark is in Alhambra. I know he has been waiting a long time. Mark, welcome. I appreciate your patience. Thanks for checking in with us on Postgame Bruin Talk.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, Brian. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, well, I did want to talk about the game, but you brought up a very good point in terms of, let me just start off. I think Eric Bieniemy may have stumbled onto something when they started Martin. He started, if you can tell, he started to scale down the game plan. He used to do 3-step drops, 5-step drops, and he'd get the ball out immediately, as opposed to when Garbers is in there, he does this 5 to 7 step, or 7-step drops, because he knew that the Penn State has a very good rush, and he needed to get the ball out to the first or second read. That's number one. So Bieniemy actually should kind of like take stock, say, okay, well, this is working. Maybe I should do more 3-step drops, get the ball out, and don't expect your offensive line to hold the pass rush. That's number one. And then number two, I do agree with you in that no one likes to say I was fooled. No one likes, because it makes you look stupid.
For basically. Sure. Nobody likes to admit mistakes anywhere.
Exactly. And so I think that's why it's kind of hard with what happened with Chip Kelly. And I was a big I really, I was a big fan of his. I'll be honest, and it's, when you brought up that point about, hey, listen, he played us. And that got me thinking, say, hey, you know what? I think Brian's right about that, and that he was looking for something better, and he was just biding his time. And so, yeah, we got paid. We got played. He fooled us, and it's not easy to admit, but basically, I think what you said is that's the truth, because he wasn't willing to recruit. And so I think my point would be, I think it was Guerrero who hired him. And so I'm pretty sure it was Guerrero who hired him.
Yeah, it was Guerrero. It was
what
Dan.
I'm thinking then is did he tell Guerrero at the beginning, I'm not going to recruit? Or how did this happen? How can you, as an AD, if you're Guerrero and you see that your coach is not recruiting, I know Guerrero was probably one foot out the door because he retired soon thereafter, I'm pretty sure. And so I think a lot of this stems from Guerrero. And then, as I think if you mentioned, it comes from the top, the chancellor, in terms of the importance of where UCLA football. We see UCLA basketball now beginning to pick up the ball in terms of NIL. So we know that can happen with basketball now. Why can't that happen with football? And I think I don't know. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. It's just not, I think you said it right. You just can't continue to fire the coach. It just seems like there's a lot of hands or a lot of people who really could share some of the blame in what UCLA football is. But on the positive side, I do have to say I was somewhat pleased to see the fight that UCLA. I was totally expecting them to get just crushed, but I was pleasantly surprised to see them, still in the game, basically by the end of the third quarter, beginning of fourth. But yeah, so I do see improvement with definitely their defensive line and the pass rush. But anyway, I know that's a lot to digest, so you can go ahead and talk about anything you want to.
Hey, Mark, appreciate you. And call in next week as well. We'll be on. And to go off what you said, look, I can say this now. Chip Kelly he doesn't have a lot of friends within the UCLA athletic department, just the way he left. And we talk about, we go back to the recruiting, the lack thereof, and now it's really showing itself on the football field for UCLA. And Deshaun Foster is, unfortunately, he should not be getting a bunch of blame for something he walked into. But Chip Kelly, and I said this on a prior show, Chip Kelly had his spark at Oregon. And that was, 15 years ago? He's like the guy who was wearing his high school varsity jacket and he's 40 years old. The guy that is like going back to something that happened so long ago that nobody cares about, as if to say, hey, look what I did. But this is a what have you done for me lately business. And to be quite honest with you, Chip Kelly, and a bunch of you have followed the history of Oregon football, he walked into a really nice situation. It was up on a platter for him. And he's the one that gets all the credit. But, and to the discussion about him recruiting, he did get called out for a show cause, a recruiting violation at Oregon. So he's never really been good at understanding the world of recruiting. Some might call it the underworld of recruiting and what it takes. But I can't say this enough. Chip Kelly, we are in where we are. The problems of UCLA directly related to the apathy, the passive recruiting from Chip Kelly. Because unfortunately, and my mom went to UCLA. I love this university so much. And all I want is for it to succeed. Chip treated UCLA the last few years, and I said this at the beginning of the show, but for some of you who are just joining us now on Postgame Bruin Talk on AM 570, I want to bring this up again. Chip Kelly treated UCLA as if they were his side chick. And he was always looking for something that was better, but until then, he was just going to roll with whatever he had. And when he kept looking for what he thought was better, he was turned down. There were jobs that there were reports that years while he was the head coach at UCLA, he was throwing feelers out there as if he was looking for a way out. That's not who you want to be as the coach. And I can tell you this, wherever Deshaun Foster stands, it's one thing to know that I don't think there's ever been a head coach, at least in the last, certainly more than Chip Kelly, who takes the losses as hard as Deshaun because it means more to him. This is not just a job. I felt like Chip Kelly at the end of his tenure, it was as if he was just showing up for a paycheck. If you saw the defensive coordinator for UCLA, Akaika Malloy, earlier this week, the guy broke out in tears because he was like, I had been up for 48 hours trying to figure out how to get this team better. It means that much. The players respect. They are not going to quit, but they're at a significant disadvantage. That's the problem. It's not fair. It's not fair, but this is what Deshaun Foster has signed up for. He knew there was a lack of depth. He knew that there were options limited in certain places. And just because a few games isn't going well, and let's just say this whole season doesn't go well, just moving on for him is not the decision I'm going with. You can't just keep doing that, especially with a guy who needs time to recruit. Look, I've talked one-on-one with Deshaun, and he can win you over. He can win you over, and it's going to be recruiting. Think about the recruiting. That's going to help us get to the next level. Might not come this year, but wait until next year and beyond that. Got to shout out our producer, Katie Newton, a superstar here on Postgame Bruin Talk. UCLA will be hosting Minnesota on Saturday at 6 o'clock next Saturday, so we'll have the postgame for you. If you missed anything from this show, I will tweet it out, the full podcast version, on my Twitter at Bryan Fenley tomorrow. So a lot of fired up callers, and we appreciate you, and we will talk to you next week here, Postgame Bruin Talk.